so tonight we're gonna go over, I started off with old business because, Melvin wanted us to go over the mission statement, I guess, pretty explicit if anybody had any questions about the mission statement. David, are you on with us? David?
Yep, I am. Sorry, had to finally unmute.
Okay, thank you. Nice to see you. So any questions on that? The only question I had on that is when the mission statement was formed by the select board, did you already were looking to put a charter in place in Hadley? Or this is just the information that we are receiving that we may go towards that way? Determining on all of the information that we get from everybody else.
Yeah. David, would you agree this was intended to be exploratory and it may result? But not.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns that I don't remember. One of the board members brought up. It was, well, why are we doing this? And it was explained that this is just to see what's out there and to see the best direction. Maybe what we have is the best direction for us currently, but it's not. It's not the only intent to just make a charter.
Okay. That was my only question. I think it might clarify from everybody. Did anybody else have any questions on?
You might want to reword the mission statement because that's not what it says. The ultimate goal of the former government committee is to gain the support and confidence of the public through the creation of a town charter.
Yeah.
Establishing the framework for organizational structure for the town of Hadley.
That's what confused me, Bill. And why I asked the question.
Yeah, and I think what Melvin was explaining at the previous meeting, I think it was Melvin, he said that sometimes the result is technically a charter, but what you're creating is clarifying language. So even if we're not changing how we operate in terms of organizational structure, that there's confusion potentially resulting from what we have.
Can you give me some of those? Did you have a packet for me?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, sorry, I thought I gave it to you.
No, everybody else but me.
So
So I'm fine changing the language.
if you just delete that last sentence of the first paragraph, you're not pre-selecting a result.
That makes sense.
Thank you so much. So I don't know if everybody had time because of getting the materials late. I did send a message to Melvin via the computer and his iPhone that we did not receive the things in a timely fashion. So that kind of bothered me that I got them yesterday and then faxed them to everybody. So it really didn't give everybody a time to go over all the materials that were sent to us. So in light of that, I think we're gonna have to change that and just everybody take time to read what was sent to us. I don't know if anybody was able to do that yesterday. No.
Well, I think
No, and I
they just got it
couldn't
sworn.
open your,
Oh, you couldn't open it either.
Yeah.
So did you get it again? I sent it again?
oh, I didn't look again.
Okay, all right. You got it back
I got it this morning.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm not computer savvy, but I'm trying.
So if I still can't open it, you could send me a copy of what you have.
I think,
It's in there.
Molly just gave you everything that was in there, John.
Okay,
She was gracious enough to print everything for us today.
gracious.
Well,
Were you able to open it, David? Mary?
I was, but you forgot to send them to me. Molly sent them to me last night. You left me off the email. I forgive you.
Oh, well, I haven't seen you for such a long time. Where you were, but since the elections are over, maybe your own base for a while.
I'm out and about.
All right, thank you.
Do we need now to take Bill's recommendation? Delete that last
yes,
sentence and formally vote on that,
all
or?
those in favor of deleting that last statement of the mission? And did you want to
So I'll make
substitute
a
any,
motion
Is
to
is
delete.
it our place to delete it or?
make a
is-
suggestion to the select
And then we
board?
can bring it back to the select.
Yeah.
board.
I'll make a, well,
Make a motion.
no, I'm not a participating member. I'm an alternate.
Right, so I'll make a motion that we delete the last sentence at Bill's recommendation, for
Second.
review by the select.
Oh,
board.
yeah, second. And bring it back to the select board. Okay, second?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, thank you. All right, that was the only thing that I had seen. And then that was on the old business. So on the new business, so I was just going to, the scope of the mission. So I guess the scope of the mission is what, he has sent us, and that was to, be able to charter versus, a special act, review of special acts and charters, example was the Hadley Administrator, which is a bylaw. And I think that was in our pile here of, what the bylaw is for the town administrator. And it has special acts in it here, so, I think we're all kind of, I mean, I haven't really read any of this either, so does anybody have any recommendations or what they feel on the scope of the mission? And what we should be aiming for? I mean, it's kind of hard to, I think, to get into this when we haven't really even looked at anything here.
So one thing I came across just at a quick look, I happen to be familiar with the administrator bylaw. I was here when it was drafted.
Were.
And in fact, it started out as administrative assistant. And,
Yes. Robert Crosby.
yes, and that was a downgrade at town meeting to make it more palatable by saying this was not going to be a person with major power. So that's fine. I think it's a little misleading to say that the section in the bylaw setting the date for the annual town meeting is all there is, because as I recall, there's multiple statutory sections on town meeting. It's not like we're just winging it. So I think that's just a little misleading to say that this is all we have about our town meeting.
Right, well. I mean, Mass General Law itself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot more that applies to us
Mhm.
without us having to adopt it and put it in our bylaws.
Mhm.
The whole rules about posting the meeting, when you post it, what gets on it,
Yeah.
those are laid out in existing law,
Mhm.
which we don't need to tinker with if we don't want to. I mean, if we can say we'd rather do it a different way and get a special act, but there's a lot more to it than they're mentioning here.
Well, and I think,
Because it was changed too. We used to do it in April.
that was the election.
That was the election.
Yeah, so this is the amended one that has the third Tuesday in May,
Yes,
but then if the town meeting stays the same.
yes.
And I think, based on our previous discussions in the meeting, with the folks from Collins Center present, I think just in terms of narrowing any scope, to me, all of the language around annual town meeting is somewhat irrelevant to our discussion because we're in agreement that we're you know, we're not intending to have any conversation about changing annual town meeting,
Mhm.
right? So I would think we just kind of accept that.
I would agree.
And I understand, because
Yeah.
I understand what they were telling us, we can't because of our size.
Exactly.
We are an open town meeting town.
Correct, yeah. We don't have the numbers to be anything else.
And that information would be irrelevant to the charter if we did have a new charter. Right,
Even if we have a new charter, it's still going
Yeah,
to
right.
have
yeah.
open town
Yeah.
meeting, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But that also would have to be an act of government that you would have to have that changed.
Right.
At legislator.
Mhm.
Legislative.
Is there a problem, perceived problem that we need to, address, fix, whatever?
Was there a problem to begin with when we did this mission statement? To have us change from a bylaw?
Oh,
to a
you're not
charter?
talking specifically town meeting, you're just talking about,
No, I'm not talking about town meeting, I'm talking about the form of government.
From charter to bylaw, right?
bylaw to chart, yeah.
Right, so was there something that precipitated to change it?
Yeah, I think I'm more fairly say, and then David, you want to chime in here from the select board as well. Again, not necessarily to change it, but that it's pretty important in terms of, you know, when you look at the duties and responsibilities as currently laid out for the administrator, supervise, direct, and be responsible for the efficient administration of all departments and employees within the jurisdiction of or appointed by the select board, right? And I think that we're at a point in the town where we're starting to consider new positions being added that didn't previously exist. That, you know, the changes afoot, and you want to do it in the context of taking a look at, well, what exactly do we have now? What's working? What isn't working? And I think, you know, certainly during the past few years, with a new administrator coming into town, right? Our previous administrator was here for 16 years. But with a new administrator coming into town, there seemed to be some confusion around roles and responsibilities, not only of the administrator, but even of the oversight of the select board. Some questions around, again, some of the personnel who report to elected boards, you know, the way that they're structured. And really just wanting the town to run as efficiently as possible. I know David has raised a couple of times a question about where the select board spends our time. You know, do we really need to be doing some of the things that we're doing? Is that the highest and best use of our time? So it was those questions in my mind that really kind of precipitated this.
As I looked at this material before, the last meeting, I looked at like the school board and I asked the question at our meeting. What's the difference between the superintendent overseeing an operation involving several buildings and dozens of employees, all of whom report eventually to it happens to be a woman now, but what's the difference between that organization and select board?
Oh,
And-
plenty, John, you were on the select board, I mean, it's totally different, you only have the school department to control. Whereas the select board and the town administrator has all of the other departments, and whether or not, except for the elected officials such as planning board and assessors. I mean, those are the only two other committees that are elected, am I correct?
No, Park and
Library.
Oh,
Rec
library.
and Park and Rec.
But the buildings and things that they use are town property, which actually come under the purview of the select board.
Mhm.
Even though they're supposedly make changes or do what they need to their buildings, but it's still a town building.
Well, and I think the other part of an answer to your question, John, is that we've had elections that were contested for select board seats. We've had nobody running for select board, or maybe one individual running where they're, they immediately are appointed because they're, again, they're the person who's willing to sign up. And every election cycle, the select board composition may change. And our town is, in my mind, just of a sufficient size now. We have over $20 million budget. And you have 5 part-time people who may or may not have time, because they've got day jobs,
Well, they don't have time, let's face it.
to run the town, given the way the authority is laid out. So that's a question in my mind, is that what's best for the taxpayers?
Well, when I asked the question at the last meeting of people who served on the school committee, what's the difference? The answer I heard was that the school committee sticks to policy.
Mhm.
And does the select board just stick to policy, or does it look at itself as overseeing the departments, which is what it used to do when I was a selectman?
Mhm.
And so then the question becomes, what's the role of, given where we've grown, Molly, what's the role, the most efficient role of the selectman vis-a-vis the town administrator? Seems to me that that's should the department heads be overseen by an administrator who is overseen by a board?
I think the question actually comes down to expansion of power and change in authority. So it changes from what we have now, an administrator who is governed by the select board, not being able to do a lot of things that she or he should be able to do without running back to the select board every time you turn around. So it's an expansion, I think, of the power and of what the authority is.
Well,
David?
Joyce, I think you nailed it. That's the comment I get from people, that this business of nothing can, or many things have to go past the administrator to the select board and then back down. And there are a couple of issues. One is authority and undermining the authority of the administrator. And the second is the amount of time that's chewed up
Mhm.
in that give and take.
Yep. David?
I mean, you covered most of it, but one of my main concerns was the amount of time that we spend discussing the hiring of every DPW laborer, every police officer, everybody in town, as well as the confusion of who reports to who. We have some people, town employees, that whenever they have an issue, they run directly to the select board and bypass the town administrator because they feel they report to the select board or a certain select board member that might be their liaison instead of the town administrator. So just some clarification, and I think to take some of the day-to-day, I guess, minutia off the select board's plate, because it should be something that the town administrator is entrusted with making day-to-day operational decisions without having to call a meeting to hire somebody, somebody minor. I can see department heads and, things like that, but the reporting structure needs to be clarified and streamlined. And as far as what the town administrator is able to do without select board approval. Now, I'm not saying without select board oversight, because there does need to be some reporting and some oversight there to make sure things are being done, as the select board sees fit. But at the same time, like I said, every DPW laborer doesn't need to be run by the select board.
David, I completely agree with you. As a matter of fact, I chuckled when I watched the DPW guy present an employee, presumably an hourly labor, and then the board of selectmen, who not only had no clue as to whether that person fit in the team or had the skills or anything, but then proceeded to vote approval. And I completely agree with you. Well said.
I take the point on minutia, but I don't recall it was an issue back with David Nixon or Robin. Even though we had the same reporting structure, I don't recall. Certainly the police chief and the fire chief would bring in people, and that's partly PR for their department, but did the select board delegate to the administrator some hiring authority?
No, we were still doing it even when David Nixon was here.
Yeah,
Yeah. All of the appointments come to the select board.
yeah,
I think there's certainly times where we said, we don't need to be involved in the hiring process, which is how we operate for the most part now, like let the department head, and now we have an HR director and the town administrator, do your thing, and then the end result can come to us.
well, and always now they can come to you and say, we've hired somebody for this position without having you to say,
Vote, yeah.
yay or nay, you know, but they're the ones, and I think now progressing to having an HR director in town, which we hadn't had for a good number of years, I think this has helped offset some of that, you know, we haven't kept one in the base for a while, but, hopefully this one will be a little bit longer run in it.
Mhm.
But I think it's a good start to have somebody in that position. And work in coordination with the administrator without having to run back to the select board for everything, for all the departments. You know, your head of the departments and hiring the senior center director or, you know, your police chief, your fire chief, that certainly is totally different than hiring a worker for the highway department or something like that, or even my mind just went blank. Nick, to work with the TV, and, you know, I think that, you know, I think it's a move in the right direction, and that's my own thing.
I think the way that we're set up is just the way how I feel on this is that this was a great model for Hadley when we were a 3-person board years ago, when we had, you know, I guess you could say not almost a big city agenda every select board meeting to take care of, because that's the reality. We have hours and hours of discussion that we need to take care of. And so when it was just a lot less busy a long time ago, then sure, we can review every labor. But I think things have changed, and the amount of stuff that we're involved in, and the you know, ambulance issues and this and that, and you name it, that we tackle on a daily basis. We just, it doesn't work for the modern day Hadley, unfortunately.
I agree, David.
Anybody, John, do you have any?
Well, I'm just wondering if the starting point for this committee should be to think about the ideal structure, the ideal role of the select board relative to the town administrator,
Yeah.
and then refine that concept.
Yeah, I was thinking that we have the administrator, like it'd be nice to have the select board and sort of compare.
Mhm.
I think that's the crux of it right there.
Mhm.
I really do.
Mhm.
I mean,
And I think in what our executive branch is, what does that entail? What are we promoting? How are we, some type of examples of what's wrong with what we have right now? What do we want to accomplish? No change may still be a charter. May not be a charter, and it may be a charter. It depends on what type of bylaw you want to put into place, but the challenges and the flexibility that we might have to change those things, I think, you know, is what we're looking at. Policy board, do we have a policy board? Admin board?
The select board,
The select board is your
Yeah.
policy board, you know, so really they are the ones that set policy.
so one of the things I was wondering, and, you know, this was pointed out, and we really basically just had today to start looking at the 3 examples. And they were pretty clear that this just happens to be kind of fresh on their mind because one of them was relatively new, and But I started going through and looking at some of these samples and thinking about like using Hanover, the Town Manager Act as an example. Under Town Manager powers and duties that are laid out. You know, powers of appointment, which is exactly what David Phil was just talking about. You know, highlighting this is different than what is in our bylaw right now. So,
What are the major differences? Do you have,
oh, I'm just using that as one example. So in Hanover, they have delegated the power of appointment to, in their case, it's a town manager, but they've delegated all of that to the town manager. So, I mean, it starts out saying the town manager shall appoint and remove all non-elected department heads and approve the appointment and removal of all other town employees except employees of the school department. There's
okay,
great clarity in that.
but that gets us back to the elected issue. Why do some towns have elected planning board members and some have appointed planning board members? Well, not to pick on.
Well, no,
For planning board, but
I think that gets to one of the areas that they said we weren't eligible. It's a little confusing when they talk about a town manager form of government for Hanover. I thought we weren't eligible for a town manager form of government.
Not a town council.
Okay,
Yeah, what we can do, town administrator or town manager, but we have to keep the select board. We can't go to a town council or any city type
so
stuff.
I guess the answer would be, and it might be in here somewhere, if the special legislation says that the planning board, certainly in cities and towns, as far as I know, the planning board, for example, is appointed by the town council. You get back to appointed. In fact, I think that's the case in Amherst, that the town administrator doesn't have full appointment authority.
The town manager.
Town manager doesn't have full appointment authority. It has to be, it's subject to ratification by the town council.
Yeah, I don't know what Paul has. But I'm just wondering if as a logical next step, we should, before our next meeting, take the time to go through this, compare it to what our bylaws say.
Yeah.
Highlight the differences for discussion.
Oh, definitely. I don't think we're
Yeah.
gonna do anything with these tonight until we have a chance to read them. I don't think that's fair to anybody.
I have a question. If we start to examine the ideal role of the select board relative to the town administrator, are there legal issues involved in terms of who is ultimately responsible for a decision poorly made?
Well, we bring a determination to the select board, and then it's up to them on how they want to proceed with what we recommend.
That's why we carry insurance.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, between a bylaw and a charter, I guess that's gonna be what we feel is important for the town and which way to go.
it's another example. Our Board of Health, is it appointed or elected?
Elected.
Okay, what would the difference be if it were made appointed? In other words, if it was changed from what exists today to what could be more efficient to some people? What would change?
Well, what would change would be who's the appointing authority, right? So whether that,
Right, but in terms of its operation, what would change is what I mean. I know the appointing would change, but in terms of its operation.
One of the issues we have with elected boards appoint or hiring their own staff separately than the town administrator or the select board is those people report to those elected boards. For example, we'll say the assessor's office, right? So not to pick on Dan, but Dan is, he reports to the assessors, not to the select board, not to the town administrator, if I'm correct. Molly, is that correct? So, yeah. And so, he's retiring. So let's just say the next person that we get in, it turns into a complete problem child and doesn't want to do their work and doesn't want to show up. The assessors don't have, the town administrator there is there every day overseeing the operations, but yet they can't discipline the employee. They can't do anything to the employee because they report to this elected board that is not there observing things on a daily basis. And let's face it, they're part-time even more than the select board is. So there's a lot of situations like that where there's not, it's a mix of elected, appointed, who reports to who, all across the board.
And a potential problem.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, we always say, I mean, Hadley's very fortunate, we have wonderful personnel.
It's amazing it's worked.
It's amazing it's worked as long as it did, but to David's point, we're always one hire or election cycle away from
Disaster.
a problem, yeah.
Well, and we hire, which is ironic that, as you mentioned, the Board of Health. Well, the Board of Health at one point in time didn't have somebody else doing the inspections. The actual Board of Health people that were elected went out and did the inspections.
Or didn't.
Or didn't, or the Title Fives, or whatever needed to be done. So they were responsible for that, and now we have a new board that has hired somebody to do the actual work that the Board of Health originally had done.
Mhm. Right,
So,
and again, you're
and is that
election
what-
cycle away
Yeah.
from having an entire, back in with the old model where there was no full-time qualified employee. We could have, as a town, have had a Board of Health with no one with any skill set to do any of the responsibilities inured to that board, right?
And there could have been a strong personality with a direct conflict of interest in the duties of the Board of Health. And we could have gotten in trouble pretty quickly.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's part of the things is, is that what our executive branch is, elected officials versus appointed officials? Where we change the bylaw, the active law, when we have the town clerk and the town treasurer, we're now appointed and not elected.
Collector and the treasurer.
Collector, thank
The
you.
clerk remains.
The clerk is still elected,
Elected.
yes.
Which would be, again, I'm wondering, just because we have Milton, Hanover, and Sandusfield in front of us as examples, might be curious to look and see if we can find what their appointed versus elected structure is.
Well, and I did ask when I had my little meeting with Pat and Melvin, they were going to see about the surrounding towns, and they had mentioned South Hadley, South Deerfield, Hatfield, to see what they had. She believed Hatfield was a bylaw, but she was going to look into the others, which we have not received yet, so I will
Okay.
touch base. I think going out east is beyond us. We certainly need something a little bit more local on what other towns our size or bigger than us are doing, so I'll ask them to get those for us.
And Joyce, the question is, what is the question, are these officials appointed or elected? Is that the main point?
Well, who do they respond to? Is it the town administrator that
Well, that would
oversees?
partly depend on whether they're elected or appointed.
Correct,
So is that the question?
that's the question.
Okay.
Yeah. And what they actually have, do they have a charter or do they have a bylaw? Does South Hadley have a charter? I don't know. I think they might, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Is there anything else that we needed to discuss for tonight?
I
Because,
just wanted to jump in on the charter bylaw thing. I mean, I don't
Mhm.
think we're getting rid of bylaws. That my understanding from what they're talking about is the charter is just sort of like a wrapping of everything that we have that explains all the rules, and there may be bylaws under it. And the existing ones maybe need a little tweak if there's anything in the charter that requires something that's not in the bylaw, but we're not really choosing between the two. We're gonna, if we write a charter, it's sort of, a summary of everything beneath it, not a replacement.
Could be, more or less, it could be a small charter
Could
with,
be.
with bylaws underneath it,
Yeah.
that might be it.
One of the most useful things we did at the last meeting was to view that chart that showed the chart of, for the town, organization chart. And it was a real eye opener for me to look at the great horizontal
Yes,
line. Did you notice it?
yeah, I did notice that.
What,
Yeah.
try to explain what I'm trying to explain.
So there was sort of a horizontal line of
Yep.
everybody sort of reporting to I think to the select board. And so it was a very horizontal organizational structure as opposed to sort of a vertical
Yeah.
with layers, flat organizational structure. So, I find it helpful. I'm sort of a visual person, so it's helpful for me to look at organizational structures and look at org charts to help understand the text as well.
But I thought on the select board, we did have at one point an organizational structure that was like a pyramid, if I'm remembering correctly, where it started with the select board and it went down to all the other different departments. Remember that?
Yeah, right, I mean, there's one that's more comprehensive that shows the entire.
Yes, we did
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah.
But I think what Sally's talking about is the one that basically shows
Yeah.
the select board, town administrator, and then a whole bunch of boxes going this way.
Right.
And some of them with dotted lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
when I saw that on the screen, I said, I can't imagine any other organization with several hundred employees and several thousand voters, benefiting from organizing that way. I just can't imagine. You just wouldn't do it.
Well, it's been.
But it's amazing it's worked.
Somehow everybody just let it go, did the best they could, and it did work. We have a good financial team. We have a lot of good things that we have that do make things work. And we're actually, if you look at how we're situated, we're a pretty good town, to tell you the truth, from what we have and what we have on our coffers and how we do things. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
The question is, could it be better? Could it work better?
Well, that's the question. That's what we'll look at, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't wanna change just for the sake of changing. We wanna change because you're trying to solve a problem either perceived or inevitable.
But if it could be better, we have an obligation, don't we, to try to make it better?
That's why we're here.
Look at her smile.
So for the next meeting, we'll look over the materials that we got. So that's the old business.
So basically, it's the three documents that Molly passed out.
Yep.
Cause I had printed out some other stuff that, when I was searching through the list of documents.
Okay.
Seems that there is one or two. Let's see. You have Milton,
Milton with that Hanover.
Milton, Hanover, and Sandusfield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there was also, Harvard and Medfield.
With the meeting town charters that they link.
Oh, I didn't print those off.
Yeah.
That's because I didn't flip it over and look at page 2.
It does look like it sort of ends there,
Thanks, Sally. You're so kind.
Harvard and Medford, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are just hyperlinks right in that email, so everybody should be able to just click
Yeah.
and grab those.
Okay. All right, so we'll look at those over. And bring back your thoughts on that. Anything else I should be asking Melvin or Pat for the next time we talked about, to get the other, charters or whatever from the other towns.
You know, I don't wanna swamp people with legalese, but I think it's a bit misleading to say, you know, this is all we have. There is a statutory framework for municipal government. And, I think I'd like to just have them, you know, at least give us some citations to it. I don't wanna go digging through it all myself, but, you know, there's how you run a town meeting is tightly governed by state law. It's not just that one paragraph, and duties of a select board are specified somewhere.
So would you like them to give us the
I'd
duties
like
of a
them
select board?
at least to get us a reference. You know, they sort of said, well, it's a patchwork. There's some in your bylaw, there's some in state law. And then saying the charter pulls it all together. I don't buy that. I think there may be enough in state law. I just haven't had a reason to go looking for it.
Okay,
But I would appreciate at least a summary of what statutory structures govern the operation of a select board. Whether there's any statutory language regarding town administrators. You know, clearly there is something, because when they were telling us, well, you can't have a council or you can't have a representative town meeting because of your size. There's something that says that.
Yeah, says who, right?
And I think we're just not getting the context, here.
okay. So I'm going to ask them for duties of the select board, statutory, structures
Yeah,
of the select board and the town administrator.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm just guessing that the town of Milton must be a pretty sizable town. It's adjacent to Boston. And they probably have a different form of government based on their population
Mhm.
that
well,
may
yeah,
make this irrelevant. to
Oh,
them.
I thought that they only picked towns.
Yeah,
No,
all I know is Milton is a very highly populated town.
is it? I know it's a very affluent town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I'll ask them about the other ones and see if they can come up with,
Well, that's a distinction between cities and towns.
Mhm.
That's a separate distinction. Because, you know, we have the town of Amherst with a council, the town of South Hadley with representative town meeting.
That's
And
population
Northampton with a
based.
mayor.
Northampton's a city, but, you know, there's a nuance there that I'm just not grasping.
okay. Let me ask them for that, and, so that'll be the new business, what they can supply us with, and,
It looks like Milton has just over 28,000 people in their town, according to the last census. So quite a difference in size, but who knows where the cutoff is between, is it, 30,000, you become eligible for the next thing. So
okay. Good to know. Anything else? No?
Motion to, well, no, I can't make motions.
But you can suggest what you just did.
Would someone like to do a motion?
The move.
The minutes?
Oh, yeah, did anybody have a chance to read the minutes?
I did.
I
briefly, yeah.
Yeah,
You didn't?
I did not.
You did
Yeah.
not, so we'll hold off
Yeah.
till next
Do
week on
next time?
those, to approve the minutes for next week. I did take, everyone is here present for our meeting tonight, so, no absentees. And, I guess
Would you like a motion to adjourn?
that sounds like a plan, John.
The move.
I'm sorry, before we do that, actually, just nuance of open meeting law, because I'm not sure that we did that. We have a hybrid meeting, so, we have David, Phil, and
Mary.
Mary
Mary.
Connie.
Mary participating remotely,
Oh, all right, yes.
and that John Allen, Molly Keegan, Bill Dwyer alternate, Sally
Present here.
Lanowski,
Mhm.
John Silvestro, and our illustrious chair, Joyce
Oh,
Chuglo.
yeah, who had forgot
Present
that
as
little
well.
bit about hybrid, so thank you.
Yeah, we should do that at the beginning of the meetings.
Yes, okay.
Should I put in the minutes like who was zooming and who was physically present? Should I
Yes,
specify
please.
that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And if we do
Problem.
make notes and people are zooming, I have to take a roll call vote.
Right.
If we have any,
Okay.
So including the motion to adjourn,
okay,
right?
motion to adjourn, yes. John,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Sally, Molly,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.